The Spurs became the first team in NBA history to have a 10-game win streak in 6 consecutive seasons. One word comes to mind: consistency. Skip, you finally had a true test with your Spurs this season. How impressed were you, though?
Stephen Naismith, the man who invented basketball, I'm here to tell you about my Spurs that was their first real test. And for it, I give them an A-. Save for the first quarter and Tony Parker's 2 missed late free throws, I thought they were highly impressive. Even though they shockingly came out, to me, flat-footed in that first quarter, in which they gave up somehow 32 points. And we heard Coach Popovich in a sideline huddle say, hey, you're letting them treat you like they're your big brother. And that was exactly what was happening. And then my Spurs, the best defensive team in all of pro basketball, clamped down on defense. After 32 in the first quarter, they held LeBron and company to an average of 21 points in quarters 2, 3, and finally 4. And speaking of LeBron, Kawhi Leonard outplayed LeBron, only slightly, but outplayed him on both ends of the floor. And Kawhi winds up going for 20 and 10 with a team-leading 5 assists and 2 blocks and maybe 3 or 4 other changed shots. And equally important, Tony Parker outplayed Kyrie Irving. That was the one that shocked me, because Tony has a problem guarding that kind of scoring point guard. And he did a number on Kyrie, outscored him 24-16, and got some revenge for what Kyrie did to Tony and to the team last year in this game in San Antonio, in overtime, obviously, with 57 total points. The Spurs, the deepest team in the NBA, as we just heard LeBron say, finally just wore LeBron's team down and out, especially in the fourth quarter. Spurs bench outscored LeBron's 35-12. And in the fourth quarter alone, 8 different Spurs scored. But as I told you all last year, what I hated about my Spurs was that they couldn't close out close games. They lost game after late game after late game, and it finally bit them in the behind in Game 7 at the Clippers in the playoffs. But last night, they went old school down the stretch, going on 40-year-old Tim Duncan, 55 seconds left, little sweet turnaround, classic banker over Kevin Love. That was the biggest shot of the game to me. And then 38-year-old Manu Ginobili, blast from past, goes left-handed all the way to the basket and lays it up off the glass for a classic Ginobili hoop. And then finally, Tony Parker missed the 2 free throws, shades of last year when Kawhi missed 2 free throws late in this game that could have closed it. And the new guy, LaMarcus Aldridge, comes from nowhere and steals the rebound, gets fouled, and he made the 2 clinching free throws. So my takeaway was, I saw a team that is highly capable of beating Golden State in a playoff series and beating the Cavs in the finals. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, my thought was, number one, Kawhi Leonard is just a quiet superstar in the making, blossoming before our very eyes. Clearly, he's been around Tim Duncan. The personalities are damn near identical, at least from a public persona, because they have very, very little to say, but they do so much. And Kawhi Leonard plays on both sides of the ball. As far as I'm concerned, the 2 guys that have impressed me most this year, Skip, outside of Steph Curry, of course, being the superstar that he is, the 2 guys that have impressed me the most is Kawhi Leonard and Jimmy Butler of the Chicago Bulls. We'll talk about Jimmy Butler another day and how I think this dude has emerged as maybe the best off guard in basketball. This brother is special. And I look at Kawhi Leonard, and he's special because of what they do on both sides of the ball. But what I would also like you to remember, as I watch this game, understand Kawhi ain't going to drop. I'm sorry, not Kawhi. Kyrie is not going to drop 57. I knew that he wasn't going to do what he did to the Spurs last March. But at the same time, he ain't going to be, 16 points either. This dude is somewhere in the middle of that because Kawhi is big time. 6 of 17 shooting, 2 of 5 from 3-point range. 16 points. He's going to do better than that against Tony Parker and the Spurs on most occasions. LeBron, he's going to give you a little bit more than that as well. But you also have to remember, Skip, this isn't the same old Spurs, although it's the same old results. What you have is a situation where out goes Tiago Splitter, who's big, 7-footer, but very physical. Not necessarily as mobile, but mobile enough. But now you got a guy in LaMarcus Aldridge who's an offensive threat, even though he wasn't last night. But he's just as, if not more mobile. He's just as lanky, meaning his length. Okay, he defends and he causes you some problems. And by the way, I'm shocked, Skip, that you didn't bring up this one individual. I expected you to bring him up. His name would happen to be Mr. David West, formerly of the Indiana Pacers, particularly in the first half, grabbing some offensive rebounds, getting a few points. Popovich adroitly creating mismatches where there were times, whether it was a Boris Diaw or a David West or something, the person in the vicinity against them was a J.R. Smith, who's clearly undersized, or an Iman Shumpert. These are the kind of things that the San Antonio Spurs do to create mismatches and take advantage of certain players being out on the court. That's what makes Greg Popovich so great. It's what makes them so great as a team, because they see it for themselves, sometimes even before the coach tells them. That's what happens when you have continuity and you're able to play basketball together. Tony Parker is a he's won numerous championships. He should be considered for Hall of Fame credentials. He's been arguably the best point guard in the NBA over the last several years in terms of body of work, and he needs to be respected. They have the continuity and chemistry. They have the coaching. And when you think about Greg Popovich against David Blatt, no disrespect to David Blatt, but he ain't on that level, not yet. And that has a lot to do with what you saw unfold last night. Because in the end, what it comes down to is that whether it's Love, Kyrie, LeBron, you know what you're getting. You know where the ball is going. You know what they're trying to do. You have no clue how the Spurs are going to beat you. You just know that it's going to be collectively, and somehow, some way, somebody's going to hit you. But you don't know where the blows are coming from or when they're going to arrive. That's what the Spurs do. Plus, they clamp down defensively. That's how they were able to clamp down defensively, because Cleveland is relatively predictable. The Spurs are not. And that's what I think you saw unfold yesterday, not to mention the fact, because of their length on their front line, like I told you prior to the game, there's very little you're going to get inside, and practically every shot you take against them is going to be a difficult one. The reason why Kyrie's the X factor is because Kyrie can dance on you to the point where he's creating open shots for other people. That's what he can do. If he's not doing that, Cleveland is very ordinary, even against the San Antonio Spurs. And that's the way it's going to be.
By the way, the reason I didn't bring up David West is that was the longest I've ever talked to open an NBA topic, and I feared if I went 10 seconds longer, you might just rip out your earpiece and walk off the set. And then I had to give the floor back to you, and then you talked twice as long as I talked to open the topic.
Well, my problem with you is never your length, the length of your dialogue and your soliloquy. My problem with you is your absence of content. That is my problem with you.
I thought
you understand?
I gave
when it comes to basketball,
what happened
when it comes to basketball, at least 5 times a year you should be banned from talking about the sport. Other than that,
I'm going to go one other direction, and you will say I should be banned for talking about this. I got to bring this up because the contrast I saw last night, it amuses me, and I'm not criticizing LeBron for this. But do you realize how much he coaches the team? Do you realize LeBron just takes himself out of the game or puts himself back in the game whenever he feels like it? Like at one point, he just walked off the floor like, okay, I don't want to get my 3rd foul. And Blatt's looking at him like, you want to leave the game, or you want? But wait a second. Then at one point, there's an out of bounds play, and LeBron wanted Delly to stay in the game because he had a mismatch with Patty Mills, and LeBron thought he could post up Patty for the inbounds pass. That's what they tried to pull off. And David Blatt sent Kyrie back in, and LeBron's waving Kyrie out of the game like, no, we want to keep Dellavedova in. And can you imagine Tim Duncan turning to Greg Popovich and saying, no, we don't want Patty Mills in the game.
like I said,
Yeah.
it's night and day.
Yeah.
It's night and day, but no disrespect to Blatt. Popovich has been around for
Well,
a
I
long
know.
time, and he's proven. And Blatt just got here, Skip.
Well,
so I'm not going to hold that against Blatt. But
I still don't love him. I'm with
Listen,
LeBron.
you
I
may
coached
not-
that team too.
Well, I'm just saying that's the issue
Yeah.
because he can coach all day. He'll never, no matter how great LeBron is, he'll never outcoach Popovich.
No, I agree, but I got the feeling last night that LeBron looks over at the other bench and thinks, gee, I wish I played for that guy because that guy really has command of what's happening.
Most
You're probably
players
right.
in the
They do.
most players in the NBA, most players
Yep.
look over at Greg Popovich and wish they were playing for him.
Yep.
Most
I agree.
of them do.
No question. ESPN's basketball power index on your side, Skip. They give the Cavs Spurs the most likely finals matchup and the Spurs the best chance to get to the finals.
Wow. There's this little Golden State team that still keeps hanging in there.
Yeah, but Cleveland, that's wrong. Cleveland clearly has an easier
I
path
would
to the finals
agree.
than anybody in the West.
Yeah.
All right, we will leave it there. The Packers travel well, and the Cards certainly know how to defend their home turf. So what gives? More